Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Patrick Goddard, president of Brightline Trains. Welcome to the podcast, Patrick.
Thanks a million, Grayson. Great to be here.
Super happy to have you here. And as my friends know, and I won't shut up about this, you have the best train experience I've ever experienced anywhere in the world, and that's from Europe and the Northeast. And it's absolutely incredible and magical what you're doing down here in Florida. So thank you for coming on.
That's very kind.
Patrick, how has your background in hospitality impacted the way you've run Brightline? Because as a Brightline customer, I've noticed all these incredible little touches that make this really wonderful, magical experience.
Thanks for pointing that out. It's great to hear when individuals recognize the effort and thought that we've put into the experience. We are, first and foremost, an experience-focused company. That was one of the founding principles on which we created Brightline, because we understood what a terrible perception and what an awful experience train travel in America had been up until that point. It was very utilitarian and viewed mostly as a commodity and a way of just getting people from point A to point B. So, as you may know, my background was in the hospitality experience, as you just mentioned. I spent the better part of 2.5 decades or so working with hotel brands and independent boutique hotels and 4- and 5-star hotels. I worked for Lowe's Hotels, Rosewood Hotels, etc. And like in that world, what we did over the last couple of decades, and I'm certainly not to be credited for it, but it was people who went before me like Ian Schrager and others who paved the way to take the commodity of accommodations and turn it into an experience. And what they learned through that was not only was it a better deal for the guest, but it was a better investment thesis for the investor, because you, in many cases, were creating a little bit of a new standard. You didn't have to adhere to all the rules, and you could create this wonderful experience that was far better tailored to the community, than just a, cut and paste branded hotel that, you'd wake up in the morning and not even know where you were. So I use that analogy to describe how we developed Brightline. We developed Brightline in the same way. We wanted people to feel, we wanted the community, the Florida community, to feel like this was their asset. And we wanted to bring the community into the stations and onboard the train through food, art, music, fashion, sports, entertainment, etc. So, we created a lot of experiences within the train and the stations to do that. I think the other huge differentiating factor is we hired people through the lens of the experience we wanted to create. And, the mantra was, we are going to reinvent train travel for the better. And if I was sitting in front of a candidate and they believed what we believed about how amazing train travel could be, then they were hired, and we would figure out how to teach them how to do, teach them the rest. And that's why you found, we hired people who genuinely cared about other people. And, you can't train that, you can't teach that. You either have that or you don't. I can teach you how to make a cup of coffee. I can, teach you how to, scan a bag. I can teach you how to do, open a door. I can teach you how to do a lot of things, but I can't teach you how to be a nice person and care about someone else. You got that from your parents, your upbringing, your culture, your whatever. That's a lot more difficult of it. That's not such a transferable skill. So when you find people who innately have that power of making people feel welcome, you have won most of the battle. And then you train them for the skills that they need to be proficient and professional in their dealings with our guests. And, that yields a winning formula. It's not the first time anybody's done it. We just applied it to an industry that's never really seen it before.
You took the greatest element of the hotel industry, is that the guest emotional connection with the property. I used to live in California, and we stayed at the Hotel Bel Air a lot. And there was this incredible emotional connection, the way that they treated my family. I'll never forget it. we're swimming in the pool, and there was a gentleman there with a warm towel. My daughter got out of the pool. Never had to ask, never had to make an ask. It was just part of that experience. It's something that I'll never forget. And these individuals at the hotel, they were like a family, and they cared, and they treated the guests right. And I've noticed that with your employees, and you've done really great stuff in hospitality. You did a dramatic, wonderful, incredible job with the Rosewood Keneal Bay. I mean, you took the iconic Rockefeller property and took it to the next level. When you look at an asset, whether it be trains or it be hotels, are you looking at all this? How can we build an emotional connection with our guests? So today it's the trains, and then it was your hotel guests?
Yes, it is. I mean, these are all component elements to giving a business a soul, if you will. I mean, that's sort of some of the nomenclature that we use. But more than anything else, what we think about is, like when we would look at a hotel asset, for example, what we would think about is, what is a competitive, you'd look at all the normal things. What's the competitive landscape look like? What's my location? But then you start to really think about who your target customer is. And then you start to think about that customer's journey. And what you need to understand is that customer's journey doesn't start and end at your hotel door. It starts way before that and it ends way after that. And getting a very clear understanding of your customer's journey from end to end, and this has now become particularly relevant in the transportation space, understanding that door-to-door experience for a guest or for a traveler has become more and more important. And there's airlines like Etihad out there that get that and provide, limousine services from door to door on either side of your flight. It's thinking about that entire journey, but then you start to look at that journey through the five senses. And, what does the guest see? What do they smell? What do they hear? What do they feel? What do they taste? Right? That's how you create that emotional connection. Because, the things that people comment about, a lot of the things that people feel, they can't quite put their finger on why they feel it. It is the combination of all of those elements that make them feel something. But if you can actually make somebody feel something as a result of, that thoughtful effort around designing an experience, you win. You win because, again, if you start with the end in mind, you're designing this experience around a particular customer demographic, psychographic, et cetera. So, things appeal to them. There's a place in the world for Marriott Courtyards and Hampton Inns. There's a place in the world for those. They're at a certain price point. But again, when you don't really know where you are when you wake up in the morning in one of those, like you're not really feeling anything, right? It's a commodity. You have enjoyed the commodity of accommodations. You got a hot shower and a bed and the AC worked and like that was fine. But if you're looking for more of an experience, and like the experience economy is upon us, it has been upon us for some time. And, the hospitality industry figured it out first, I think. The restaurant industry was close behind, but now it's starting to reach into transportation, into healthcare, into, cosmetic surgery, into like retail, into all kinds of other realms. Whereas, before, we were all in the business of selling commodities. Like how many widgets can we sell and, how much can we sell them for? And what are the distribution channels? Like that's not enough anymore. Today's consumer is becoming way too sophisticated and has a higher expectation. And if you miss that expectation, you're a commodity. And like, I'm indifferent as to whether I use you or the five other options that I have. And if we truly want to like pry people's like white knuckled fingers off steering wheels in this country, we've got to provide them with a compelling alternative and something that's like actually, that functions, but that's also a great experience. So we believe that experience piece is the key to making this work in a sustainable way for the long term.
You're 110% correct, and I repeat again, 110% correct about the experience. And as we go into a post-COVID world, experiences are going to dominate, and there's going to be good experiences and bad experiences. But you have really great experiences. When I'm on your trains, I feel calm, I'm relaxed, I'm happy, they run on time, As I said earlier, they're completely clean. How did you go about designing this entire customer journey and experience? When I arrived, my wife drops me off at your West Palm station going to Miami. I'm like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a great experience. Like, I'm so pumped up to get on the train. Like, what did you do? Because everything you seemingly did, you did exceptionally well.
I appreciate that. And like, I stand on the shoulders of giants. There was like very, very smart people involved in this project from the very beginning. Our CEO, Mike Reininger, who really was like employee number one, who had come from Disney and worked on significant multi-billion-dollar projects all over the planet, was a thoughtful designer and a guy, an architect by profession, and understood how to create spaces that were welcoming, that felt open. When you walk into our Miami station, I have heard like more times, like if many times, that it's like a Zen experience to walk into our train station. And, when's the last time you heard Zen and travel in the same sentence, right? Particularly Zen, with commuting, okay, as it relates to like commuting in South Florida, like those things, just like those things do not, end up in the same sentence ever. So, it's just things like creating open spaces, lots of light. And like, again, there were circumstances that drove things like subways underground, and in doing so made it difficult to create that kind of an environment. But like the built environment is a big part of it. There's like the digital environment, which is sort of your first touch point, right? So that's got to work. That's got to work well. Then when you arrive, it's the built environment. And, you think about arriving at our train stations. We thought about arriving at our train stations in the same way as you would think about arriving at a resort for a vacation. Like, what is your first impression? What do you see first? What do you encounter first? And how does that make you feel? So like, for example, had we put all the turnstiles and the security checkpoints downstairs in the lobby, that would feel very different from the way that we have that station set up, where you walk into the lobby and it's open. There's nothing. There is an escalator that brings you up 2 floors, and then you get to the turnstiles. So you don't have this like Penn Station or airport, like, everybody's like sheep walking through the Tensa barrier, waiting in line to be like scanned, screened, packaged, labeled, and, sent out the other end of the processor. You walk into our station and it's open, it's airy, it smells nice, there's music playing, there are friendly employees who are like neatly uniformed, have shaven themselves relatively recently, or at least have a plan for their facial hair of some kind, right? And you immediately feel at ease, and you feel like you already, the goal was that when you walked through the station doors, that you already felt like you'd arrived. You already felt like your trip had begun and that you were in good hands. And that like, I don't know if you've ever been to like a Penn Station or where everyone's like, they're like lemmings. They're all sort of standing, looking up at a board, waiting to race to whatever platform they're supposed to race to. It's like the epitome of stress. It's a stressful environment. So we wanted to be the antithesis of that. And that was like the guiding principle on all of our design. And that's why, and Rockwell worked on the interior design with us. Rockwell are well known for their hospitality design. So when you get up into the departure lounge, this does not feel like a departure lounge. It just feels more like a hotel lobby. And there's food and beverage available, and you can get a cocktail or a glass of Prosecco or a cappuccino. And it's meant to be a nice experience. And like, these are not difficult things to execute on. Somebody just needs to care enough to put them in place and provide them as amenities and services to complement the function of moving people around.
Look at Penn Station, been there many times, or Grand Central. You're right, there's this hustle and bustle to get in and out as fast as possible. In your station, you're right, there is a Zen-like approach, and you have these incredible restaurants, and there's friends of mine in Miami. They go there for lunch because your restaurants are high quality. You're not cutting corners. You're saying, I'm going to put a restaurant in. We're not going to put this concept was going to serve food as fast as possible, not be good. We want people to sit down and have a really great experience. So you're doing all these experience things incredibly well. And another thing I've noticed in the experience with you that was interesting, you were the head of the trend on contactlessness. The boarding pass, the experience, all contactless. Did you see that trend coming, or is it you said, you know what, this is a better experience because we're going to a mobile first world?
It was a little bit of all of those things, Grayson. I mean, I think like number one, we are an ESG focused organization, and we've got some, pretty specific goals as it relates to sustainability and in particular our carbon footprint and waste and so on. So that was one motivation. Two, the second was, we made a decision to be cashless, which is a little controversial at the moment because, it may exclude certain groups of folks who cannot be cashless, but we've now got accommodations for those folks. But for the most part, we're cashless. So, that allows you to adopt this mobile first strategy. And in fact, we've taken advantage of this downtime to enhance some of that technology, which we can talk about. But I think our view was predominantly governed by friction or lack thereof and a desire to eliminate friction. We just thought like everybody's going to end up with a phone in their hand, right? Like if they don't already have a phone in their hand. So like the transaction, the ticketing, the access to the station, like all of those things should just happen in your own device because that eliminates all of the friction. You don't have to get on a website and print a ticket. You don't have to go and like stand for 10 minutes at a ticket kiosk and type in your email and your date of birth and your like how many siblings you have and whatever else and print out spit out a ticket on the other end. We wanted it to be frictionless. And that was really what drove most of our desire to go mobile first. It just made sense. It's absolutely the right strategy, particularly now. And like now what we're trying to figure out when we come out of the other side of this is how do we eliminate the rest of the friction, on either sides of the experience. So like we no longer, although like our major focus in launching was to make sure that our experience was perfect and as good as it could be, what we had to recognize was we are only the interstitial part of the trip. What's happening to that person from their front door to their final destination, or from their office to their home, or from, wherever, A to B. And like, if we ignore that and think that we're just a company selling train tickets for that interstitial part of the trip, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Looking to the future, do you partner with a ride-sharing service? Do you eventually launch a branded autonomous vehicle service where you control that experience? And so when you pick the individual, and I like to call them guests, you pick the guest up at their home, they get to the Brightline station in Miami, they hop on the train, and let's just say they go to West Palm because they want to go to the Breakers for dinner, for example. You have another AV that takes them there, so you control that whole experience. Is that something that's in the roadmap as you look towards the future to, from door to door, it's a completely controlled experience?
Yeah. So this is an area of has been an area of fascination for us for the last couple of years because of this recognition that we got to worry about the whole experience. So first of all, I think if we expect to promote a car-free culture for people, or a car ownership, a revolution whereby people no longer own their own vehicles, or they're using autonomous vehicles, they're using shuttles, they're using shared vehicles, we have to think about transportation as an ecosystem. And that ecosystem, we think our role in that ecosystem is to carry people from city to city. But again, it would be short-sighted of us not to be thinking about solutions for people to get within that city, solutions to move around within that sub-hub. So, if we're taking people to hub, how are we moving people around that sub-hub? And there are a number of answers depending on where you want to go. And some of those answers are public transportation. Some of those answers are like limousines. Some of those answers are rideshare. So we have to be pretty democratic about who we have partnerships with. We got to be really careful. For example, like it would be very easy for me if I wanted to monetize those relationships to have all kinds of exclusives or preferred relationships with micromobility providers, rideshare providers, you name it. But then I no longer have it. It's no longer a democratic offering, and I'm not providing a service to everybody. I'm like it's by its very nature, the exclusivity excludes a whole swath of people. So I can't. We feel like there will be an ecosystem at every. Well, not we feel like we already have and are continuing to grow ecosystems around our stations to get people to the places that they want to go. And we're trying to give people as many options as we can because there's a spectrum of demographics that we're appealing to, ranging from people who want white glove service and get like a limo to and from the station to people who are prepared to take a bus or other public transportation to and from a station. And somewhere in the middle, I think there are some services that we might want to, in some way, fully control, our own, our partner with, or fully integrate. Now, our goal is to integrate all of these service providers. And when we reopen later this year, you will have a trip planner in our app that will actually help you plan your trip from point A to point B, all the way through, including our train component. There will be a couple of them by the time we open that will be fully integrated. Like I'm talking like level 4 or 5 mobility as a service, whereby you can actually plan it, pay for it, and get ticketed. But in the meantime, so a couple will be fully integrated, others will just be deep linked. But the goal is to fully integrate all of these service providers, at least at a hyper-local level for us at Brightline, at each of our stations. So like in Miami, for example, there's Metro Mover, there's Metro Rail, there's Tri-Rail, there's the Miami Trolley, there's Lyft, there's Uber, there's, 6 or 7 different micro-mobility guys, there's City Bike, there's, Beep, there's whomever else, right? So that is the vision. That is the vision. Now, might we own our own autonomous shuttle with routing capabilities, with routing technology? Like, I think that's a really smart thing for a train company to do, because now I can, for a $5 add-on, I can pick you up and drop you off within 3 to 5 miles of my train station, right? And I can make that a fully branded experience. I'll put the same seats in the shuttle, or like you'll have Wi-Fi. We'll, serve you a can of beer or a glass of wine. Like, I don't know what that looks like yet, but we are definitely exploring that. I don't need to tell you what kind of an explosion there's been in e-bikes over the last 12 months. So should we own e-bikes? Should we give people e-bikes? Like, if you become a monthly pass holder with Brightline, do I also give you an e-bike? That's part of that deal. So there are ideas like that we are exploring, some of which we will deploy when we reopen, and others will grow into over the next couple of years. But at the end of the day, we recognize that transportation is an ecosystem. We are only one part of the solution. We're a significant part of the solution. And correspondingly, we get a pretty significant seat at the table with some of the other mobility providers as we start to talk about how we move people around a sub-hub.
I'm really excited to see your autonomous vehicle powered by Brightline, because you and I talk offline. That's the future. That's where when you integrate an autonomous vehicle into another service as part of an experience, is when it's going to absolutely boom. And you've talked a lot about the mobility ecosystem and multimodal transportation. Was that because you grew up in Ireland, riding a bike to elementary school, taking a bus to high school and college, where you didn't own a car? Is that when you really realized, hey, there's multiple modes of transportation? I'm now sitting here running the coolest, cleanest train in the world. I can integrate all this stuff?
That sounds like a cool story. I don't know how true it is. I mean, I definitely have more, a better understanding and a higher value in my mind for alternate modes of transportation to cars. Frankly, cars were If you grew up in Europe, you could not afford a car until you were about 4 or 5 years into your job, right? And that assumed that you got like a good job out of college. And even then, a lot of people didn't own a car. So I have seen public transportation work really well, let's just say. So I know it's possible. I know what the realm of the possible is. So does that maybe, it definitely colors my optimism for what's possible in the United States. I think we've got a like learning curve, hill to climb, whatever you want to say, to sort of penetrate that market and the American psyche so that, you know, others start to feel that way about transportation. But this is why the experience needs to be great. This is why the technology needs to be frictionless. This is why you need to make it door to door. You need to make it like people don't think about. Everybody says that, you know, car gives me freedom. I can do whatever I want. Like you pay $10,000 a year for your car, like, you know, on average, plus or minus. And yes, it feels like there's no friction because the car keys are in your pocket. You walk out and your car's parked in your front drive. What you don't realize is all the frictions on the back end when you get stuck in traffic and you can't find parking and like you get stuck in traffic on the way back again, right? Like that's where the friction exists. But you don't think about it that way. When it comes to trains, the friction's on the front end. How do I get to the station? What time is the train leaving? Is it going to get me where I need to get to at the time that I need to get there? You know, how do I get back? Like where, you know, that's where all the friction is. So our strong belief is that if you eliminate all of that friction using technology and partnering with multimodal partners and solutions, you take away that friction for people, you now have a viable alternative. And like on top of that, it's a great experience, right? And again, it's a feeling like we would have guests get off our train. I remember in the first few weeks, like there's some people for whom the train was aspirin and others it was like a vitamin, right? Like, you know, some people had like a big headache because they had to get on 95 every single day. And they're like, those people, you know, the first, second, third, fourth, 10th, 15th time they rode our train, literally were grinning ear to ear, getting off the train, high-fiving our team on the way into the Miami station or, you know, getting out in the Fort Lauderdale station or whatever. Like literally that was, but even the people for whom it was more of a vitamin, like, hey, you know, don't really care. Like I wasn't in a hurry anyway. This is a nice thing to do, or like it's a fun thing to take the train to Palm Beach and go have brunch at Restoration Hardware, you know, a little change of scenery. Even those people were like, you know, again, our net promoter score was better than like Zappos, like it was better than Ritz Carlton. Our net promoter score was better than Amazon, than like, so it was off the charts. People loved the experience. And I think we believed from the beginning that that's where we needed to be. Like Condé Nast is written about our train. Like how many trains other than maybe the Orient Express, you know, have gotten an article at Condé Nast? So these are all things that we think we need to do to start to convert the American psyche to train travel. And, you know, listen, we were on our way to carrying 2 million people in our second year, which was right where we thought it was going to be. And that's only for a 67-mile, you know, 3-stop railroad in South Florida. Like imagine when you're connected to Orlando and to Disney and to Tampa and, you know, stations in Aventura and Boca. Like if you look at Italo, they started off really, like again, they had a similar idea, started off though way too expensive with not enough stations. Then they kind of, you know, flipped that on its head, added a bunch more stations, lowered the price, and they like blew up and sold at a 15-time multiple to a big infrastructure fund, and everybody made a bunch of money. But I mean, these things make money, these things do well, but they have to be well executed, and the experience and the technology to me is at the forefront of that execution.
You're 110% right about the experience of technology, and as you scale to Orlando, to Disney World, to Tampa, Aventura, Port Miami, how are you going to ensure that experience is the true original Brightline experience that's not diluted?
The number of stops has no impact really on, I mean, the only thing that impacts is travel time. And it's marginal, i.e. like a stop in Boca and Aventura, those two stops are going to add 4 minutes to the travel time. And in the case of the port will be an alternate terminal to Miami Central. So you'll have, and it will likely be like a Miami Port Express that takes people directly into the port or takes people out of the port directly to wherever they're going. And there's only going to be I think initially what we thought about for the port is a couple of trains a day each direction. So because there's very fixed patterns, for cruising, and like the goal there is to work directly with the cruise lines on getting people in and onto ships before they leave, and off ships when they arrive, right? So outside of that, Aventura and Boca are like, it's a 4-minute addition to travel time. And I'm not certain that every single train is going to stop at both of those stations either. So like 4 minutes, I don't think is changing any. Like what people focus on when they hear about a train like ours, it's intercity, express, and then they're like, well, you're adding all these stops. Like what people recognize after riding on our train a couple of times is that the time piece of it, it's not that it's not relevant, but it's way less relevant than you thought. People focus on it and they're like, well, 3 hours to Orlando. Well, I can drive to Orlando in 3 hours. Well, by the way, like can't drive to Orlando in 3 hours. It's unless you're like literally driving 100 miles an hour the entire way and not stopping. It's more like a 3.5 to 4 hour. And I got kids, so like I can barely make it past a rest stop without us getting hijacked for one reason or another, right? So and I like that excludes like traffic, getting out of Miami, getting into Orlando, weather, trucks, whatever, accidents, you name it. So putting that aside, like, okay, it's 3 hours to get to Orlando. Well, that's not that fast. Well, like what happens is you get on a train and you stop worrying about the time, because it's not about the time. It's about the reliability and the experience. It's like, I know what time I need to leave at, and I know what time I'm going to arrive there at, like with certainty. And, A. B, I'm not going to be tired and pissed off, like frustrated when I get to the other end of that journey. Like that's, like people get home from sitting on 95 for 2 hours, walk in the door, kick the dog, yell at their kids, right? Like, as compared to where, you're sitting on a train, you're relaxed, you're having a drink, you're maybe, I don't know, organizing your Uber Eats order for dinner. Like it's a very different experience. So the travel time really starts to diminish in experience, has as a matter of fact, with our regular customers, has become a much less relevant issue for them than the rest of the experience.
I would totally agree with the experience because you're calm, you're not stressed out, you're not worried about traffic, you're not getting one of these, are we there yet? Because the kids can look out the window, kids like to ride on trains. But the most important thing that I want to point out, and Dr. Jerry Parrish, who's the chief economist for the Florida Chamber Foundation, pointed out to me on a previous podcast, you as Brightline will have an incredible economic impact on the state of Florida's economy, which is the third largest populous state in the United States. So an individual flying into Orlando can visit Mickey Mouse, hop on a Brightline train, come to Palm Beach, experience Palm Beach, then go down to Miami, experience Miami. And then it was absolutely brilliant, and I didn't really understand this, that Port Miami is the cruise capital of the world with 6.8 million passengers sailing out in 2019 with 22% increase in 2018. Cruise ship business is booming. All these dollars are not going to be spent in one pocket of Florida. They're going to be spent all over. And the impact that Brightline is going to have on the Florida economy is immense. It's so positively incredible as Florida grows out of this COVID. Brightline is going to lift the state with it. And this is incredible what you're doing.
There's this notion, well, first of all, so it's a permanent infrastructure asset. So like, we're not buying, we're not building something. This is unlike, from like coming from my experience, you'd go into a market, you'd build a hotel and spend maybe $20 million, and you get the mayor to come and cut a ribbon, and everybody pretty happy about it, and you'd hire like 50 people, and like that's that was a big deal for that town. Like this is very different. Like this project is going to have over $6 billion of economic impact in the first 8 years of its existence. This is a permanent infrastructure asset. It is going to be here, like, for those of your listeners who are familiar with the railroad itself, it's existed for about 125 years, or at least 75% of it has existed for 125 years. It was built by Rockefeller's partner, Henry Flagler. And operated as a passenger railroad until the 60s and then became a freight railroad, and we acquired it in 2007 and, turned it back into a passenger. It's actually a mixed traffic route with both freight and passenger, but we operate all the passenger stuff. So that permanent infrastructure asset runs through, Florida has a population of 20 million people. 10 million of them live along our corridor, right? So we are running right through the densest, and we're adjacent to US 1. So again, if you're familiar with Florida, you're running like right through. I mean, Florida grew up around this railroad. Florida didn't exist, right? When Flagler started building this railroad in the 1890s, there was like 6,000 people in Key West. That was about it. So, 20 million people, like 125 years and 20 million people later, like half of those people grew up around that railroad. And, that's what we've improved. That's what, that we've spent about $6 billion on that, which will have an additional, so not only have we invested those dollars, but that's going to have an additional impact of $6-7 billion on the rest of the Floridian economy in the first 8 years of operation. So what happens is more businesses. I mean, if I could talk to you, like if you just looked at the amount of development around our train stations. I mean, we invested about $1 billion at Miami Central, really as a case study, just to show people what can TOD do. And, we will exit from that real estate making, a significant, I mean, that's not our core business. We will do that, and we'll do it with other people. But just the transit-oriented development opportunities around our train stations that have emerged as a result. There are 6,000 new apartments around our train station in West Palm Beach. That didn't exist a decade ago. That materialized from, starting the day that we announced that train station. Related is making an additional $2 billion of investment around our train station in Palm Beach, and the existence of our train is a major reason for that. All of the economic development councils, whether it's the Beacon Council in Miami or, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance in Fort Lauderdale, like these economic development councils whose job it is to attract employers, like we are in all of their prospectus. This is Florida's asset. This asset belongs to Florida. Whether we're talking to the governor or we're talking to these economic development agencies or we're talking to municipalities or we're talking to Miami and, Mayor Suarez, who's trying to bring the tech industry down here, like, hey, good news, people moving to Miami. You can buy a house in Fort Lauderdale and be in downtown Miami in 28 minutes. Like, by the way, I live in Pinecrest. It's 16 miles away. I live in Miami. I can't get to the office in 28 minutes. These are real benefits that the state and its major employers and cities and municipalities can offer to people that just it didn't exist. And obviously the micromobility market, the autonomous vehicle market, the all of these things, the rideshare market, have made it all the more viable. But the economic impact is significant. It is significant.
You're 100% right about the economic impact. I first learned about Brightline from Kapal Rodaja from Related, and he was the one because his office is right there by the station. He turned me on to it, and what they're doing at Rosemary Square is phenomenal. And he was on an earlier podcast, and all we talked about was experience. You mentioned Henry Flagler. He played an incredible role at Standard Oil and built the whole distribution network, but he built the Florida tourism economy because the trains went to a hotel from St. Augustine all the way down here to the Royal Pension in Palm Beach, which is no longer here, which is now Whitehall. Was this Henry Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway the inspiration for Wes Edens founding a Brightline?
I definitely think so. I mean, so there's compulsory reading here at Brightline, when you join the team. It's a book called Last Train to Paradise. And I'm going to stop for a second and tell you a quick excerpt out of there that resonated with me when I read it. That is not just something that Henry Flagler said, but totally something that Wes Edens would say. So his engineer walks in when they were actually building the train down to Key West, right? So, Julia Tuttle had done her thing and sent a box of oranges and convinced him to bring the railroad down to Miami and got a big, chunk of land as a result of that. And then he decided he has this vision that once the Panama Canal got done, that Key West would become a major shipping port. deep water port that, he would develop and you connect by rail to the rest of the country. So his vision was to get people all the way down to Key West, and he starts building this thing. He sets his engineers out there, and like back in those days, it wasn't like an FRA or a EPA or like you pretty much like it was the Wild West. His engineer shows up in his office. He says they had gotten to Lake Surprise, which is where the 7 Mile Bridge is right now, on the way down to the Keys, and he turns around to his boss. His engineer walks in and he says, sir, we've done everything we can. We just cannot engineer this like 7 mile, crossing. We've like basically run into the middle of the ocean. It's too deep. He's like, so he says to his engineers, have you ever built a pier? And the engineer says, well, yes, of course, sir. Of course I built a pier. He says, okay, great. Keep building piers until you get to Key West. So like that spirit, look, when West bought Florida East Coast Railroad, Rick Scott had just handed $2 billion back to Obama. Right. The High-Speed Rail Act happened right after that. So, we bought it in 2007, 2008, High-Speed Rail Act gets passed, billions of dollars available for high-speed rail. But it's like, blood money as far as a Republican governor is concerned. So he hands back $2.5 billion. And, that's really what inspired West to say, hold on a minute, like, why don't we go to Rick Scott and ask him to give us access to the right-of-way along the 528 Expressway that connects the Florida East Coast Railway to the Orlando International Airport. And that's really how it all happened. So Last Train to Paradise, recommended reading. You'll get a kick out of it. He was quite a spirited fellow, was our Henry Flagler. And, I think if a similar book was written about Wes Edens, about his legacy, he wouldn't be mad about that at all.
Incredible. And the thing I want to point out, Henry Flagler employed a lot of people, and Wes Edens employs a lot of people. They're having a positive economic impact on society, and they're creating jobs.
Absolutely. And not only that, but, while we're on Wes, although, his origins are from like the Wall Street world, Wes is, now a sports team owner and, a tequila brand owner. And, this is a passion project for him. This is a legacy project for him. He's deeply invested both emotionally and financially into this project. He also is the CEO of his own company, New Fortress Energy, which focuses on liquid natural gas. They're studying how to use hydrogen as fuel. It's an amazing company. Wes has made a significant commitment to the environment, via sustainability, racial equity. He's bringing power to, countries like, whether it's Jamaica or Puerto Rico, places where there is a lack of infrastructure, a lack of government investment dollars. He's able to deliver cheap power to people who really need it. He's doing some amazing work out there and definitely worth checking out. But he's a great guy to work for. And I feel very, very honored, very blessed to be in the role that I am, to be, doing what I'm doing.
He's having a positive impact on society. And for Floridians, I'm thankful he hired you, and he's letting you take your incredible hospitality background and bring it to Florida. And I'm really curious, Brightline's expanding out west from Victorville to Vegas. Will that same Florida Brightline experience carry over to Brightline West?
Absolutely. So, that project is now going to continue into Rancho Cucamonga, which is a fun word to say, but actually is a lovely city that happens to also have an existing train station where Metrolink takes you all the way into LA Union Station. So the dream there, which is becoming less of a dream and more of a reality, is that you'll actually be able to take a train from LA Union Station all the way to Vegas on a one-seat ride. And we're definitely envisioning the same level of experience, but clearly it'll have a little bit of a different flavor, right? It's a different customer. And correspondingly, we will design an experience around that customer, but you can expect the same level of service.
And there's a great Frank Zappa song about Rancho Cucamonga, and it's fun listen if you're into music. And I appreciate that you're taking the different cultures into mind, the different locations, to build this really great experience and putting this all together and everything we talked about. What is the future of Brightline?
So I think that there are a half a dozen corridors that fit the profile of too short to fly and too long to drive. And I think that high-speed rail is the right solution for that. And I think there are other solutions out there, but I think that they're for different problems. Whether you talk about Hyperloop or Musk's tunnel systems. By the way, could not have more respect for him and for that technology and for what he's doing. But what we've got to get clear on is what's the right application for the right project. And I don't think that there is a better solution for these 400 or 500 mile routes than high-speed rail and true high-speed rail. So, Vegas to LA, that's going to be a 200 mile an hour train that turns a 5-hour drive into a 2-hour drive, a 2-hour trip. So, does it need to be a 20-minute trip? Okay, that'd be nice, right? Maybe we'll get there someday. But 5 hours to 2 hours, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, I think. So, and again, the travel time starts to lose its significance once you start to appreciate the experience and how productive and or enjoyable that trip can be. So I think there's another half a dozen corridors in the United States where we could deploy a system like this. Then, and I also think, there's a couple of opportunities in Canada. There's a couple of opportunities in Mexico and other places where we might be able to do this. I think there are vertical opportunities, where we can take our technology and experience to other transportation industries, be that commuter rail or intercity rail or working with Amtrak or public agencies to take on management assignments and maybe, branding type engagements where we're able to offer the experience that we're offering at Brightline to other systems. And, so again, these are things that we're exploring, but fundamentally we view ourselves primarily as a train company, but we're really a mobility company. We're a mobility company. We are moving people around. So, the train is obviously a significant investment, right? These are $5 to $7 billion a throw every one of these corridors. So not insignificant rail infrastructure projects, but at the top of all of that, we are a mobility company. And, the technology that exists today is what enables that to happen. So, that connectivity, that first and last mile connectivity, the ease of use, the absence of friction, the enhancement of the experience, these things that were fairy tales even 5 years ago are now possible. And I think that's super exciting. And that's frankly what makes me very excited about the future. There just aren't enough hours in the day to do all of the fun things that we would like to do. And, I wouldn't have it any other way.
You're 100% right. I lived in Beverly Hills, and that drive to Vegas is absolutely horrible. Your train is going to do incredible things, because the thing that you didn't point out that I want to point, having to get to LAX to go through, to get down there from Beverly Hills is an hour. You have to get there an hour early, sitting through that. I much rather have a tequila, sit on your train, and enjoy my way to Vegas. And I want to take it one step further with you. Brightline's not just a mobility company. Brightline is a mobility experience company, because you are going to hit the ball out of the park. And Patrick, as we look to wrap up this awesomely insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
I think that everybody has a vision of what train travel is based on their own prejudices and experience. Try it out, try it once and see what it's all about. And if you're in our communities where we're already developing, come in and experience it. I think there is a quality of life enhancement opportunity that you cannot fully appreciate until you experience it. This is kind of like, if I told you about a new theme park ride at Walt Disney World, you'd kind of be like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. But until you actually experience it, you have no idea what that's going to do to you or do for you. I liken that to the Brightline experience. You don't understand what it is until you've done it. And come this fall, you'll be able to experience it again We look forward to expanding it to Orlando, and happy to invite your listeners to come and visit us and spend some time and get that experience, and maybe we can bring it to your hometown.
Awesome. As Patrick said, go experience Brightline. If you grew up in the Northeast like me, it's nothing like those trains. If you grew up in other parts of the world, it is the cleanest, most well thought out train service in the world, and I highly recommend you experience it and try it because you will fall in love with it. The future is bright, the future is autonomous, and the future is Brightline. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Grayson. Great to be here. Thanks so much. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.